Hello, everyone. We have several people signed up for today's event. So we're going to let people come on in after being in the waiting room for a little bit. I see our attendees joining as I speak. Want to welcome you all today. I am Lisa Morris, the Assistant Vice President of Public Relations and Corporate Communications for Hudson Valley Credit Union. We're so happy you've joined us for today's final webinar in our 2021 Women in Business Series, Executive Leadership Communications. Our keynote speaker, Sarah Ross with Brain Amped, will give us a rousing send-off next Thursday, October 21st at 8:30 a.m. And please note the time of that session is a little earlier than the other sessions that we've had. If you haven't registered yet, please visit hvcu.org to do so. I'll be putting a link in the chat at the end as well. I had a meeting with Sarah last week, and I can tell you that if she brings half the energy to our keynote that she brought to that meeting, we're all in for a treat. We'll also be announcing the winner of our Women in Business $5,000 fund contest that morning, so we hope that you can join us. We know that many of you are Hudson Valley Credit Union members, but for those of you who may have just found us on social media, I'd like to say welcome. We are a financial cooperative for businesses and individuals who live, work, worship, attend school, or volunteer in 12 counties, running from Westchester and Rockland up through the Hudson Valley to all the way to Saratoga County. And we're proud to host events like this one for our members and the community. If you're not a member, please visit that website again, hvcu.org, for complete information about the products and services that we can offer to you and your business. So as you may have surmised from my job title, today's session is one that's very near and dear to my heart. And despite the song in Wicked that suggests good communicators are simply popular, we have a panel here today that knows that it takes much more than popularity to get your message across in the right tone, with the right words, and at the right time. I am so excited to hear from all of them today. And at this time, I'd like to ask each of them to take a moment to introduce themselves to you. Ellie, let's start with you.
Sure, thank you, Lisa. My name is Ellie Nieves, and I am an attorney in legislative and regulatory affairs for a Fortune 250 company. And I also have my own company called Leadership Strategies for Women, where I help high-achieving women to show up, speak up, and step up in their careers. I look forward to the panel discussion.
Great, thank you. Dale, how about you?
Good morning, everyone, and I'm very excited to be here today. I've spent my career communicating first in the education and psychology arena, and that's where I hold my master's degree in counseling psychology. And then I transferred it all over to the business world, where I've spent about also 30 years in corporate America, working with professionals of all levels and also in the public sector as well, come off the way they want to be heard, so that using the right words, like Lisa was saying, the right tone, and coaching professionals to understand how their words can have impact to get the results that they want.
Thank you, Dale. And Valerie, last but not least.
Good morning. My name is Valerie Mason-Cunningham. I'm excited to be here, and I am sensational by choice. The greatest freedom is the freedom of choice, so we choose wisely. I am an executive coach, recently retired from an amazing 38-year career at Xerox, where I rose up to senior management and executive levels. I love inspiring other leaders who want to do more with what they have. And so my mission in life is to take all of my wisdom and knowledge and to inject that into those who want to curate their personal experience map so that they can level up their skills and show the world their greatest gifts that they can bring. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you all, ladies, for joining us. Before we begin, I would like to ask everyone, if you do have a question, please place it in the Q&A as we go along, and I'll be monitoring those so we can get to as many as possible. We do have a few questions planned ahead of time, but if you think of something, please place it in the Q&A. If you would like to use the chat function to network amongst yourselves, that's wonderful. We encourage that. Share contact information, get to know one another. but putting any questions in the Q&A itself will ensure that I see them. Frankly, some of our chats on these webinars have gotten a little long and it's easy to miss an important question. So thanks for using the Q&A function. So let's begin. Executive leadership communication is a big topic and we can go in a number of different directions. But Ellie, I'd like to start with you. Can you tell us a little bit about the types of communications that you prepare and deliver, both in your current role and maybe in some past roles that you've had?
Certainly. So one main source of communication that I provide is writing briefs for the CEO at my company, as well as for the general counsel and any other member of the executive leadership team that I have to interact with on a regular basis. Those briefs are important, and it's important to tailor the briefs based on how the executive leadership team member likes to digest information. So the higher up I go up in an organization, the more I realize that you really do have to tailor your communication to the individual that you're providing the communication to. So a good example is the former CEO that chaired my company. I used to have to write extensive briefs. She liked a lot of detail. She wanted to know all the ins and outs. She wanted to be very prepared when she went into her meeting. And my current CEO, he likes to be prepared as well, but he'll take more of my information verbally. He likes to sit down and he likes to work through the ideas. He likes to, go back and forth on some of the material. And then that's how he digests information. So it's important, I think, that as we communicate at the executive level, that we understand how people like to digest information so that we could be very effective in our own communication style and delivery.
It's a lot about knowing the organizational dynamics of the particular group or organization that you're in.
Absolutely. And a good example as well, yesterday I was giving a presentation to a host of regulators, and I prepared a PowerPoint in that situation because so much of what I was delivering was very detailed. I was actually talking about regulations and artificial intelligence in the UK, in the EU, and then also in the US. Very detailed information, very nuanced. So a PowerPoint was very helpful so that they can digest what I was trying to communicate. So it's important, as you said, to also understand how the organization functions and what are some of the unwritten rules of communicating as well, so that you are as effective as you possibly can be when you're communicating.
So when you prepared something as detailed as that with the PowerPoint, and I know many of us have gone into a situation with a meeting, do you give them the PowerPoint ahead of time? Do you wait until after and send them a deck later? Or do you let it be just you're talking verbally and they're digesting it as they see it?
It depends on the nature of the presentation. Like, for example, if I am presenting a PowerPoint to my executive leadership team, one of the unwritten rules is that you do send it in advance. Everyone wants to digest it in advance so that when I actually show up at the meeting, nobody wants me to go slide by slide by slide. They now want to ask me questions, right? So they're going to grill me based on the information I provided in the PowerPoint. With a regulator, though, I actually provide them the PowerPoint afterward because they do want to go slide by slide. They want to ask you the questions as you present each and every detail that's on the PowerPoint. So that way it's more interactive. And then they like to go back and reflect on what was shared and then come back and even ask me more questions later on. So again, the dynamic of the organizational communication is also very important in understanding how you're going to communicate.
That's great. I know internally here at the credit union, we have certain groups that love PowerPoints that have every single word that you're going to say written in the bullet as you say them. And then there are others that want to see 2 words as a bullet and then you explain it. So it definitely is knowing your audience a lot.
Absolutely.
Dale, let's talk for a minute about the power of words. And you alluded to that up front in your introduction of yourself. We're not just talking about grammar.
No, not at all. Not at all. And I echo Ellie's, point about knowing your audience, because as I mentioned, I started out in psychology and education. That's one way of communicating. Certainly when I was a psychotherapist for 5 years, how do you feel? What are you experiencing? Things of that sort are part of your communication, those kinds of words. But once I transferred over to the corporate arena, and particularly in an environmental engineering firm where I worked for 16 years, if I would have come off to those engineers in that, I'll say, touchy-feely way, they would just tune me out. I would have no credibility at all. None whatsoever. So knowing how your audience listens, what are their trigger words too, is really very, very important, because you can accidentally trigger someone not to listen to you if you're not aware of like the organizational fit, the culture, what's going on. But in general, I want to take a step back for all of us in terms of, we all know people who could say anything, right? People who you say to yourself, how did they get away with that? Like, what is that about? How come they could say something and people will always listen to them? They have that credibility or demeanor. What's that secret sauce? And so it's really not a secret sauce. It's the choice, we're going back to your question, of words. So I'm going to say 5 statements. And this is where I do want you, after I finish them, to put in the chat what you're hearing. So here's just 5 statements that I know we've all said, especially as women, okay? We've all said, we've either said them, we've either had them in emails, or we have, verbally texted. Statement number 1. I just want to check in and see if I might be confusing anything I said about our project plans. Statement number 2. I sort of disagree with the way we're moving this project forward. Statement number 3. I'm not an expert in these types of projects, but statement number 4. Am I making sense in the way that I want to proceed with this project? And the last statement, I guess we should move the project along in a different way. What are you all hearing when in those 5 statements? Put your answer in the chat. Self-doubt, absolutely, Tina. Sarah, doubt, without it, yes. Shanita, I'm sorry, passive, non-direct, absolutely. Uncertainty, Margaret, yes. This is what women, unfortunately, and I know that I'm not sure if there's any men with us today, but somehow men don't do this like women do. Vagueness, Viv, absolutely. And so what happens is that these are the types of what we call qualifiers or modifiers that we always have a habit of putting into our statements. And so as you're moving up the ladder, certainly getting those statements out of your communication, whether it be written or texting, is extremely important. So let's just quickly, because I want to not take up too much time, but it's looking at statements that give you clarity and conviction, right? So the first statement, just asking someone, how's it going? Short and sweet. They'll tell you what they want to tell you. The second one, I have an alternative option to move this project forward. That sounds different, right? Or, in my experience of working with these type of projects, ... fill in the blanks, or would like to hear your thoughts on this. Of course, I'm not confusing you. I just want to hear your thoughts, taking that whole idea out. And then the last one, our current plan is really not getting us where we want to go. So I have some options I'd like you to consider. What's the difference in what you're hearing in the way I reframe those 5 statements? Just throw that in the chat.
We're going to have another group of people, I think, putting things in. And to me, I know one of the things that I have really tried to break myself of the habit is walking up to someone and saying, I'm sorry, but can we blah, blah, blah. I realized I use I'm sorry so many times in a single day. And that breaks the level of confidence that someone has in me, because I have no reason to be sorry that this just has to happen with the project. It just has to happen.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so, I see Margaret, confidence. I see Anna, Annie, definitive statements, more direct. And it's not I'm not saying I know something that I don't, right? Those statements are not saying anything over the top or aggressive, but it's definitely, I love what you just said, Gail, stating a position and not asking permission. Women do that all the time. And that is in terms of being an executive and getting to the C-suite. I mean, I have a daughter in her 30s and we role play a lot because she's right below the C-suite. And to say, how are you going to frame that so people take you seriously? I mean, it's too late for me. I'm in the old generation. People are going to hear what they're going to hear. But for younger folks, you could change this. It's amazing how all of a sudden, when you change these statements, people regard you differently.
Completely.
So,
Thank
yes.
you, Dale. Valerie, this goes to something that we spoke about when we were doing some planning for this, and that is having an executive presence, whether or not you're an executive yet, and what that means to your future career trajectory.
Absolutely, and thank you for that. And I'm going to echo what all of my colleagues have said, because knowing your audience, knowing your environment, and knowing where you are showing up is so important to executive presence. It's interesting because when you think about executive presence, we clearly know that part of it has to do with look, part of it has to do with your voice, part of it has to do with how you are moving your gestures or eye contact or body language. All of that has to do with executive presence. And if you are looking to grow in your career, you need to show up in exactly the next position you're looking to be in right now. So if you are looking to be a manager, if you're an individual contributor, pay attention to what the managers look like. Pay attention to the ones that are leaders, because everybody who is a manager doesn't necessarily might want to be the one you want to follow. Pick those that you know have influence and that they are demonstrating what a leader and an executive is. Then when you show up, if it's in a meeting, conference, or in a networking event, look the part. Look the part, because you want to make sure that you're showing up first and foremost in the nonverbal communicative ways that would showcase the person saying, yes, this is an executive. The other piece is when you are speaking, make sure that you are speaking in a tone that is receptive to your audience. You don't want to speak too fast. You don't want to go like this. You don't want to be like this, because people are like, well, paying attention to what you are doing and not what you're saying. So it's extremely important for you to pay attention to your tonality. And then obviously what Dale was just talking about with words, your verbal becomes extremely important. Don't go in just trying to fit in. Go in because you know you belong there. Claim your space. But in claiming your space, you have to be well-versed on what it is you're speaking about. And so you have to prepare, you need to practice, and you need to perform. Those are my 3 Ps around executive presence. Now, an interesting fact is that when you think about the verbal, the voice, and the nonverbal body language, when people are receiving what you're giving, 55% of what they think about is your nonverbal communications. 55%. 38% is your voice, your tonality, how you bring the conversation to them. And only 7% is actually the verbal. So if you think about that, over 85% of the way people receive communication is through the voice and the nonverbal, and the voice meaning your tonality. Pay attention to that. But I will close out with this quick story that happened to me. When I wanted to be a manager, I was in a support management position, sales planning manager. My role was to make sure all the salespeople were trained, all the client facing support reps were trained, but I also had responsibility for everything the district manager needed, very similar to what Ellie does right now with her senior directors. One of my jobs was to get the sales kickoff meeting together. And for this one, our CEO of the company was coming in. So I was 3 years into the company. This is back in the early 80s. And I decided I was going to go to the store and buy a new suit. The suit was a fashion suit. The color was teal, and the blouse was white with teal pinstripes and silver. I walked into my district manager's office the day of our meeting, which the meeting was supposed to start at 1 o'clock because the CEO was not due to come into our region until the afternoon. When I walked in, my district manager looked at me and said, "What are you wearing?" And I said, "Isn't this fabulous? It's my new suit. I bought it at such and such store. It's the latest color. It is the hottest fashion." And he looked at me and he said, "This is a business meeting. This is a sales kickoff meeting. We have the CEO, who is an ex-IBMer, coming here. Fashion is not the statement we want to make. We have you hosting him before he speaks. When he sees you, he's going to see a teal, whatever the color is, suit. And who knows what's going to go through his mind. When he visually sees people in IBM, this is back in the 70s and 80s, with navy blue suits and white shirts. So immediately he's going to have a disconnect with you." He said, "And then when you start to speak, if you have all this excitement about this fashion design that you're wearing, he's not going to hear you. He's not going to listen to a word you're saying. So then when you do talk, it's going to go right through and he's going to be thinking, how quickly can I get away from this person?" He said, versus I want him when he sees you, he can envision you at his boardroom table as a senior executive in this company. And I looked back and I said, I never really thought about that. He says, "That's okay. We have 4.5 hours before the meeting starts. You will go home and you will change. And you will put on that navy blue suit that you have, the one with the pinstripes or just the plain navy blue one. I know you have them in your closet. You're going to have on your other pearls and all the wonderful things that are business attire. Because when he sees you, before you open your mouth, I want him to say, that's a person I can see around my boardroom table. Then when you speak, take your time and articulate our strategies, which you've been a part of, because that's what he's going to want to hear. And lastly, make sure that you are energy high, but not too high where it becomes annoying. And I know you can do that because I've seen you demonstrate it. And Lisa, I tell you, I went home, I changed. When I met the CEO, we had a great conversation. And like, it must have been a year after that, I had another interaction with him. Not only did he remember my name, but he remembered the conversation we were having and wanted to know how we had done against all our strategies and goals. And I will tell you, I know for a fact, it was because of the way I showed up.
Yep, that's the result that you wanted. And living with an IBMer for the last 30 years, I remember that time where it was only a white suit, a blue suit and a white shirt, and you could have a blue tie, maybe a red on certain days, but and it seems a little sexist for us to be thinking of these things, but it still holds true in today's business environment. I remember my father always telling me, you dress for the job you want, not the job you have right now.
Right. And I want to say this, Lisa, I see Karina put in, please, tips and recommendations about the looks, professional looks for Zoom meetings. As you can see us all on the screen today, we all have a professional look. What you wear is so important. And the good news is the fashion today, we have women and men designers that create fashion for women that are so business savvy, that we can look terrific and stylish and graceful all at the same time. And we don't have to look like it was a man-made suit for a woman.
That's right.
So the look is so important. You have to choose your colors correctly that accent you and don't necessarily offset what the particular Zoom meeting that you're in, so that it can be well positioned as you being a part of what it is that that meeting is looking to address. I hope that's helpful.
I can also add in that with so many of us having so many different types of meetings on Zoom now, I invested for $30 in one of those lovely little lights. I would love to say that my complexion is this perfect, but it's not. And so use the tools that you have available to you to make yourself feel better. We also logged in 15 minutes early to look at our lighting and make sure that things looked okay around us. I will say that I've done cheat sheets myself, and I've made a Zoom meeting for myself to attend only, just so I could get the lighting right before I had a larger meeting that I had to go to. Ellie, did you have something to add on that?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback that when it comes to attire, especially in this day and age, and as you mentioned, Lisa, we have so many back-to-back meetings, which means that we're also interacting with different audiences throughout our day. So I think it's important that we also dress in a transitional way. So for example, when I get off of this presentation, I'll be able to take off my jacket and I'll look business casual, and I'll be able to take on the rest of my meetings for the day. And then this afternoon, I have a meeting with another executive at the company and I'll throw my jacket back on, right? So it's important to be comfortable now when it comes to Zoom, but then also be able to dress in a transitional way that you can change your look throughout the day and make it easy for yourself to be professional in one moment and then a little bit more casual in another.
That's great.
Just one more point, because Lisa, you brought it up about our backgrounds. The backgrounds are so important, and Zoom has now enabled us with the blur feature that if you don't have the best look and feel in your home, at least you can have it where it's blurred out, but you are the center of a focus for the Zoom meeting. And so I thought that was a brilliant move that Zoom did. And
Yeah.
make sure that you have good microphones. Make sure, if you're like, I'm using headsets, and these headsets are pretty good from a microphone standpoint, but there are very inexpensive microphones that you can buy that plug right into your laptop or into your phone, and it can be a lavalier, and it just makes your tonality come through much stronger.
It does.
And
That's great.
just one more point to close this out is that you don't want anything that you're wearing to distract people from listening to you. You want to, I mean, this is about either your content or your message. It's not about the clothes. So that, I'm sure we're all wearing jeans on the bottom, but that's the great thing about Zoom. But that's what it is. It's, you want to make sure that that you look approachable, but yet not distracting.
That's perfect. Yeah, at some point, I'm really worried that we're all going to end up like Star Trek. And instead of having Zoom like this, we'll be able to like beam into each other's, and then we will have to get out of our sweatpants and stuff. That will not be fun. But Dale, this kind of makes me feel like what we're really talking about is confidence, and having confidence in your own communication skills and in the way you deliver your message.
Absolutely. I mean, confidence, as we all know, is something that we need not just to communicate, but to move forward every day, whether you want to call it the proper mindset, or whether you want to say, I have you're the glass half full, but it's what you need to make sure that the result, and we're looking at it in the business arena, that the result that you want happens. So two people stood out in my mind in terms of, and I know that we have some links for you. The first person, her name is Herminia Ibarra, and she wrote a book called Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. And her whole presence, I mean, and she's very, very big. She's actually chair. I'm going to read her. She's the chair of a professor at INSEAD. It's a graduate business school in Europe. And so she talks about in this book that most of us have been taught that leadership is something that you learn about and then you do. She's turning the sweater inside out, which she really calls outside, actually. And she said, we have to act it and then see people's reactions, and that's how we'll learn to be it. So it goes back to what we were saying about the words that you choose, the way that you come into the room, the demeanor, that when you act like a leader, people will treat you that way. So so it's the acting first, the thinking later. The thinking is, wow, building on Valerie's example, I took off that teal suit and I put on my dark suit, and taking what Ellie was saying, I looked at my audience, I looked at how do they want to be communicated with. That's acting like a leader. And then the thinking part of it is saying, and what was my response? As being introspective and saying, wow, they treated me a certain way. And that's how we train ourselves to become a leader and become more confident. So that confidence it's not something that you're born with necessarily. It's a skill that you can develop by doing. And it's a great book. The next person, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, no, I was going to say, I also put the link to Brittany's TED Talk.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about that too. And the link, so the book is Act Like a Leader, Think Like a Leader. And then Brittany Package, she's an American activist, a young woman. She was the co-founder of Campaign Zero. And she was a member of former President Barack Obama's task force on 21st century policy. She really, and also did Teach for America. The link to her TED Talk is fantastic because she talks about confidence in a way of having it be a muscle that you build. And her 3 points is building that muscle through permission, through community and curiosity. So who are the people in your life that support you, that give you the permission to be confident so that you can then practice it, hone it, right? And then that's your permission, you're nurturing your confidence, you're using your community to say, go, do it this way. This is how you come off. I mean, I was very fortunate in the background that I have of that master's in counseling psychology. We got feedback from one another, our classmates constantly. And that helps all of us build confidence so that who's that group that you trust that's going to say to you, you know what, you're coming off a little strong, or I'm not understanding you, or less confident than I know that you could be. Build that community to practice your confidence. And then the third thing is that curiosity of really asking questions, learning continually, and that's the way you build that muscle. So it really is totally under your control. It takes, and as Ellie was saying, and Valerie said, this is about preparation. Showing up the right way is really about preparation.
That's right. And as Tina just put into the chat, you have to be intentional.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, Tina is actually one of my people that I bounce things off of. She's part of my tribe, as we call ourselves. And you have to have that trust with each other. Ellie, was there someone in your past who you view as a communication mentor?
Various individuals. My background is in politics, so I was constantly around elected officials and helping elected officials prepare to speak before audiences. So I had a lot of people that served as role models for me. I saw people also maybe trip up before an audience and then watch them recover. So that's also a very important element that I had to learn, is how do you recover after you do mess up? Because inevitably it will happen in your professional career, right? We don't have this perfect linear progression in our career where there are no mess ups. But as I hear both Dale and Valerie speak, and this focus on confidence and executive presence, confidence and preparation, definitely important as you're climbing up the ranks if you want to be an executive or if you're communicating with other executives. But I think the other side of the coin with confidence is not only having confidence in yourself and your delivery, but also inspiring others to have confidence in you. So you have to show up a certain way. And I love the word that Tina used, intentional, because you really do have to go into every interaction with a level of intentionality. And one of the things that I do is I sit down and I look at my schedule in the beginning of the week, and then I make note of everyone that I'm interacting with, especially with those at the executive level. And I ask myself, how do I want to show up? How do I want to leave an impression with this particular individual? What do I need to do to get to that place so that when I show up at this meeting, I've got all my ducks in a row? So a good example is I have a meeting this afternoon with an executive, and I went through that process earlier in the week. How do I want to show up? What do I need to do in order to be that person that I envision when I show up at that meeting? And that actually led me to schedule 2 other meetings in preparation for that meeting, so that when I show up at the table, I've got all my ducks in a row, and then I can sound knowledgeable because I'm prepared, because I've had all these other preliminary discussions as well. So sometimes we need to put that thought and that energy into how we show up, because we're not just automatically going to show up with confidence. We actually need to work at it. We need to prepare. And then if we can show up looking prepared, being intentional with everything that we want to show up with, then people will be inspired to also have confidence in us and our ability to lead. And that's what leads to promotion.
So we have a question here. So after I put these tips in action, how can then I get around the old boys network that refuses to change this is the way we've always done it? I used to have a coworker who called that thwati. This is the way we've always done it. She made it into an acronym. But we do still come up against that, don't we? And Valerie, I saw a smile on your face with that one.
Absolutely, because we're in 2021 and this still exists, which is so unfortunate. And the thing is, you know, there may be opportunities where you can find some of them and spend time with them to get them to understand that differences and embracing differences actually brings about higher achieving performances. And doing the same old thing the same old way and expecting a different result is in fact the definition of insanity. So if they want to stay insane, maybe this is your opportunity to rethink where you want to be. Maybe this is not the right place for you to be. And if they're not respecting or embracing and leveraging the talents that you bring to the table, maybe this is your blessing and opportunity, opening up the door for you to go find that new place where you can excel and grow. And it's unfortunate, like I said, that this happens. And this is a lot of, you know, we can spend a lot of time on this subject because it becomes from, you know, systemic ways in which things were done, perceptions that people formulate as their reality when it may not be a false reality, when it can be a false reality, I should say. And the only way you can change it is to find those people that you can influence, that have the wherewithal to step up and say, maybe the way we have been doing this is not so good. And I've experienced that, you know, coming up through corporate America in the 80s and 90s. It wasn't like there was a lot of women sitting around the table. And if they were in decision-making or profit and loss statement roles. They were more in the supportive, subordinate type roles. And it took pushing the envelope and having those people that you knew could influence change, sitting them down to help them understand all of their biases against that change and getting them to understand the value that the change can bring could be much more fruitful. And then let them go into those environments where it's much more of a respected, start to introduce new ideas that can definitely tie back to the way in which we all can grow and be successful. So it's an evolution, and it's going to keep being a revolving opportunity. But if we don't look at these things as gifts and opportunities, then we will stay in a sabotaged mode, which is not progressing and not doing the right things. And the last thing I just want to say is this: we have to embrace differences. Don't just tolerate differences, but embrace them, because that in fact brings the value to whatever the situation is and opens up the levers of discovery, exploration, and activation, where you can absolutely intentionally foster the environment for growth.
And you know, that came up in another meeting I had the other day about we don't know what we don't know. And when it comes to diversity and inclusion in the workplace, and our communications and our working with others, we need to step out of our own comfort zones to find those people that not only may think like us, that want to move the needle forward for women in general, but learning why the other people are thinking the way they're thinking, and understanding that there is a conversation to be had among a whole bunch of different people. If anyone, I just want to remind everyone, we're here till 12:30 today, which now on the replay, people are going to go, uh-oh, what time it is it? But if you have any last minute questions, please place them into the Q&A so that we can be sure to get to all of them. Ellie, I asked you about a mentor. Dale, did you have a mentor in communications early on, or someone whose style you emulated?
One in particular, not one, but again, as I mentioned, being in a psychological program where it's all about the way you show up, so that you could sit down with someone and have a very intimate relationship as their therapist. It was always people telling you how you showed up. But certainly, I mean, looking back, I mean, I thought about this because you had asked us the question, but before I say that, I just want to build one thing onto what you were talking about before, and the question about, the old boys network, because certainly it's something that, having been out there as long as I have, I've certainly come up with a lot. The divide and conquer. I mean, and I think that it was implied in what both Ellie and Valerie were saying, and also with you, Lisa. You're not going to change the old boys network. I mean, the people who are in the old boys network, they're kind of stuck, okay? But the dividing and conquer, who amongst that network might you, building on what Valerie was saying, bring around slowly? How can you develop relationships slowly with someone? Because once one person, in my experience, once one person gets to know you, then they tell their friends, so to speak. And so your work is done by them. And so all of a sudden you aren't this foreign entity, to this old boys network, because not to sound cliches, but yeah, they view us as a threat because they're not used to dealing with our kind of power. It's not something that they're well versed in. So they're going to totally say, no, I don't want to deal with this power. So I would definitely say, Viv, look around. Who can you influence? Going back on that influence of that network that you're talking about. Maybe you have to have a coffee or a lunch or something of that sort, finding out what they value and then being influential and moving that along. But and I hope that helps you, Viv, to understand a way to proceed. But in looking at a mentor, I mean, I do point to some of certainly my colleagues at school, but also a couple of people, and they were men who were vice presidents, when I was coming up, who were able to say to me, when I used to say something, I used to have an expression, oh, I always do it this way. And one vice president in particular said, Dale, when you say that, it's very polarizing. It closes the door for further communication. It makes me feel like, well, you figured it out, so you don't want to listen to anything that I have to say. That was such good advice. And I got that advice like 25 years ago. It was such great advice because I'm not saying that I don't try, but it doesn't happen, but you learn to hold that back a little bit. And again, listen and think about, and what I'm saying, does that enable someone to listen? Does that enable someone to hear me and keep the conversation moving, or does it close down the conversation? And when I was doing that, I was closing down the conversation without realizing it. I thought I was coming off as very confident, right? But no, I was coming off as alienating. And so it's really allowing the people that you trust to give you that kind of feedback is so important. And to letting them know, I'd love for you to do it, because people aren't going to do it naturally. We're all very nice. We don't want to hurt each other's feelings, so to speak. But if you give a few people that you really trust the permission to say things to you and to give you feedback about how you're showing up, you're going to learn so much. You're going to learn so much.
You know, Ellie, you said something a little earlier that I know speaks to a lot of us that have to do presentations or things like that. When you mess up, and sometimes, you know, experience is the best teacher, and watching someone else and their struggles can help you prepare for something like that. I know I tend to, if I flub up or mess up or this and that, I'll beat myself up for the next week or so, at least a day. How do you transform yourself when there's a glitch, where there's a hitch in what your plan is?
And inevitably, we feel bad about these situations, but you know, I think we have to just let it roll off of our back, because it's a lesson learned, and that's how we have to take it. We need to sit down and ask ourselves, well, what could I have done differently? And that's always very helpful. So, you know, that's my advice. Just always ask yourself, what can I do differently? That's what I do. I'll journal about it. I'll, you know, rehash it. I'll ask somebody else who might have been a witness to it and say, what do you think I could have done better? Because maybe they've got a different perspective than what I felt that I had undergone. And oftentimes, you know, we personally make a bigger deal out of it than it really is. So it's always helpful to hear other people, but you also want to trust, you want to make sure that you can trust that the individual who's providing you with advice is someone who's going to give it to you straight, not just someone who's going to put a Band-Aid over the situation and make you feel good, right? Because at the end of the day, we want to improve, we want to get better, and we're only going to get that with honest, reliable feedback. So we need to make sure that we have these trusted advisors around us that are prepared to give it to us in whatever way the advice is going to take shape, so that we can rely on it and know that we can use that reliably to change our ways and hopefully do things differently and better the next time. That's
great. Marcia, I see you've raised your hand. If you could put your question into the Q&A, that would be great, so that we can get to you before the end of the session. And Valerie, so one of the things that we did in promoting our women in business this year was we talked about, you know, post-pandemic, it's time to reinvigorate and recharge our batteries and get to another place. And so from our communication standpoint, we talked about that. But in our earlier sessions, you have a whole different take on that.
Yeah, I really applaud this dialogue, Lisa, and with everybody who's participating. You know, this pandemic was a really rude awakening for all of us. And while it was rude, it gave us gifts and opportunities. Because in life, it's neither problems or challenges, it's only opportunities. So you have to change your mindset and reset in this season of re. And that's what we are all living in. We're re-looking, we're rejuvenating, we're reliving, we're reconnecting, we're re-energized, we're reimagining. This is our season of re. And I'm in retirement, and it's my retirement that's transformed, because I'm not sitting around doing nothing. I'm an executive coach. I serve on boards. I'm out here trying to help inspire others with lessons that I've learned through my wisdom and all of my experiences. I've reconnected with friends and family that I haven't talked to in months and years. And it allowed us to just go back and come way forward with new and invigorating opportunities. It's given us an opportunity to rethink what's important to us. You know, we were so in the go pre-pandemic. And when the slowdown happened, it really gave us a nice pause to really reflect on the things that really matter. So this season of reason is purposeful, and we should look at it as such so that we can, in fact, revive the world for the greatness that we all know it has. And with each of us re-energizing and reimagining what the possibilities can be, it's very important. And rework our priorities. I mean, it's very important that we're reworking our priorities. What's most important? Well, now that we've had a chance to stay in the house with the families and the pets, they've become very important in our lives. Not that we want to go back and not relook at all the things that they do for us, but it's very important. And this whole thing gave a refocus for all of us around the importance of life and giving and receiving. Receiving is just as important as giving. If you don't sit back and receive what people are giving you, like this panel today, they are giving you such good insights from their experiences. You can take a piece of those and then rethink what your purpose is and what it is that you would like to do. And lastly, this also gave us the opportunity to rejuvenate ourselves, where we weren't necessarily in the hustle and bustle and the running and the ripping and being in a car for 2 hours to get to a 30-minute meeting to then get back in the car for 2 hours to go to another 30-minute meeting. We were able to rejuvenate and really think about that. Now, Zoom gave us the possibility to reimagine those meetings where we could do back-to-back meetings, but not have to necessarily lose productivity time in order to be successful. So I just say, in our season of refocus, reset, rethink, relook, relive, and rejoice in the rebuilding of the reimagination of what's all ahead of us. And we all will be successful, I know it.
You know, that was the one thing in talking with you all before we did this session, is the positivity that I think has come out of a situation where it very easily could have gone the other way. And so many of us I know have been stressed out with job, with home, with kids from school, with retirement that wasn't planned. Maybe I had one of those in my house. And it is an opportunity for us to also think about the communications that we're doing. And I don't know about you guys, but I am certainly finding a lot more positive messages out there today, not only from a global standpoint in terms of like corporate communications, but I find that more intimate conversations are happening with individuals, with coworkers, and being able to communicate effectively that way as well. We are very close to being out of time. So if anyone does have any other questions, please place them in the chat. I'm going to put in a few links in a little bit for if you want to follow up with any of these things, but I'll ask each of our panelists if there's any one last piece of information that they'd like to share with the group, something special, a tidbit, a tip. Ellie, I'll start with you.
Sure. One tip that I would share is, as we're preparing for executive communications, whether it's in our own career, taking it to the next level, or helping to support others who are already in executive positions, is that we need to develop grace under fire, because being able to keep our calm and being able to stay cool is very important. It's an important image to project. Again, going back to that thought of inspiring others to trust you and your leadership. So, as you're developing your executive or corporate or, communication, make sure that you develop that aspect of yourself where you're being calm and collected when everything is coming at you. It's a very important element of your leadership.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. Dale, how about you?
Yes, I mean, first, there's an expression called building the plane as you fly it. Men do that all the time. Women do not. And so it's building on mindset and confidence and inspiration, really understanding that we don't have to have all the answers to do something, that we can begin it, take the journey, use the trust in others that we have, get the feedback that we need. And in addition, who is it, in looking at your own life, who inspires you? And it doesn't have to be anybody that you know particularly. It could be a politician. It could be an actress. It could be an activist. It could be a comedian. I mean, I love Joan Rivers, and because she had some great. I mean, one of her quotes was, never be afraid to laugh at yourself, because it could be the funniest thing you'll ever say. So, I mean, who inspires you, and using that as role models for yourself to really build upon your own growth, your own mindset, your own inspiration, because you can do it. You can build the plane as you fly it, and you're not going to crash land. It's going to stay up there. You might hit some bumps, without a doubt, but it's going to keep flying, and people will eventually fly along with you.
Excellent. Thank you. Valerie, how about you? A final tip?
I'm gonna go with the one that Zig Ziglar talks about, because I'm sure there is people in the audience that have a fear factor about executive presence and communications and what do I need to do. And Zig Ziglar said fear has two meanings. You can face everything and run, or you can face everything and rise. The choice is yours. And the greatest freedom is the freedom of choice. So my parting remarks would be, choose wisely, but choose to be who you are. Stick to your authentic self, but have your board of directors, your personal board of directors around you. And by that, I mean, you are the product, you are the brand, and you are the voice that will bring the message to the masses. And having your personal board of directors, your mentors, sponsors, trusted advisors, people that you can go to and be as vulnerable as you can possibly be, and know that it is a safe place, giving you the right feedback and ingredients for your success to continue to grow, then you will be a brand that will attract, like a magnet, the audiences and the people that you want. So stay focused forward and be your best self with style and grace.
Wonderful. Excellent way to end today. Ladies, thank you so much for a wonderful session today. I'm sure if everybody can just put their hands together, it was really wonderful to spend this time with you. And thank you so much for giving your expertise to our members and small business owners. I am going to place a link in the chat, just a reminder to everyone that next Thursday, October 21st at 8:30 is our keynote speaker. Sarah Ross with Brain Amped will be teaching us about leadership vitality. And remember, that one session is a little earlier than previous ones. Make sure you have your coffee made early in the morning. Again, hvcu.org has more details and you can register there. I really hope that you can join us next Thursday morning as well. I'll also put our email in the chat community at hvcu.org. If you have any questions about this or any of our other community outreach sessions, we'd be happy to answer those questions for you. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Please be well, be safe, and we look forward to seeing you at another event soon. Have a great day, everyone.